is that Colorado's law is before the federal law. So we started the program before the Farm Act even started. So our language doesn't always use the same terminology. It doesn't always exactly mirror the federal law, but our conversations with the DEA and the DOJ really center on what are we doing, not what is the terminology we're using. So there's always that lack of clarity about how did you get to where you're at, what are you calling this, and what are you doing that. And I always have to point out that we started before the feds did, we started before most states did. So as other states adopt language, it may be different. It's certainly not our program to tell them how they should set up theirs. So just to start with, just to point out that there is going to be some difference between the states.
And Dwayne, how does our program differ from, for example, an MOU model?
Absolutely. So our does different. So the MOU model most people will refer to as Kentucky, and I always say, God bless Kentucky, that program works for them. I don't know that they would want to take Colorado's program, and we certainly don't think their program would work for us. Every state's cannabis landscape, for one, is different. Kentucky does not have the marijuana, both either recreational or medicinal, that we have to deal with. And in our conversations with them, they have a much different relationship with the DEA because of that. So, we all have to recognize that, as we cross borders, we talk to other states, that not only is our relationship with the federal government different, our programs, the cannabis landscape we're dealing with is different, and then everybody's interpretation of what that Farm Bill is and what it says and what it doesn't say is different. So all these states, there's some states I oftentimes hear criticism of one state or another, and I always say, boy, it would be easy to sit here and say we've done it right, but there's a lot of blood in our parking lot and we haven't done it right. We maybe have hit it better than some states. But I can rest assured, over 30 states have contacted me since this time last year asking questions. And that's because we're all just as states trying to reach out to one another, because we're partners with the federal government on many things, but not this one. And so we're all out there in the dark and trying to make the best decisions that we can. As far as seed certification program goes, we're launching a seed certification program, a pedigree that we'll be looking at, as Andre and Kevin mentioned. We're going to be looking at the varieties that want to come into a seed certification program here to make sure that we have those genetics controlled, that we have the pedigree line. It's not just seed that somebody doesn't have the legal right to, can't enter that program. You've got to be able to prove that you've got the legal right to that seed. Seed then is produced in the same manner that Canada would be producing, for instance, because they follow the AOSCA rules. That's set up for purity and weeds and all the things that are traditional agriculture. We think this is really important because, again, I'm not going to pick on all these other states, but some states start with, when you turn in an application, the first thing you do is you go through a criminal background check. Well, Colorado's taken a different approach to that, and we've said, boy, this product's been criminalized long enough that we ought to start with treating this like agriculture. So the first step is not to criminalize the people that want to apply for an application. Again, I'm belittle those states that do that. I'm just saying, we've just taken a different approach. And so with that in mind, we've also said that unlike Canada, where every variety is certified, we also think that there's people in our program that probably have proprietary genetics, have no reason to be a certified seed program. Maybe they're doing it from clones as opposed to seed. And so we've said, boy, there's a great mechanism in Canada and other places for a certified seed program that is traditional agriculture. It's the way agriculture deals. Farmers understand certified seed. They understand pedigreed systems. We'll put that system in place for those that want to participate in that. And for those that are doing material that they have proprietary genetics and don't want to enter into a seed certified seed program. We'll continue to monitor those crops. We'll continue to look at those crops. We'll continue to test for THC because we won't have done the THC testing on the front end, so we'll have to do it on the back end for those folks. But we believe that those farmers have also the right to work in those proprietary genetics equally as much, shouldn't have to share them with everybody, or the state for that matter. And so we'll actually have almost, I'll say, two parallel systems that will run. The certified seed system, where the farmer can plant that certified seed. He'll know that the state has already done their job on the front end, and we're not going to be worried. He doesn't have to worry about his crop being destroyed on the back end because it exceeds 0.3%. If you've looked at, again, those folks that have proprietary genetics and decide not to participate, they have a higher risk. But some of them, we've actually have a couple that have asked us to come every year to do it because they look at it as an endorsement. Now, I will tell you that we tell them we can't do that. This is not an endorsement program that makes sure that your variety's below 0.3. We will handle them on the same risk and random based that we do for other tests. But those people that are participating in the non-program still have an opportunity. So we're not going to mandate one or the other. We're just going to give farmers an opportunity to choose.
Thank you, Dwayne. Now, Grant, is the seed certification program the answer?
It's an answer. Wow. It is a good answer, right? So a little bit of background information for Dwayne, too. AOSCA was formed in 1919 or 1919.
And for the audience, what is
AOSCA, the AO Seed Certification Association. And they were brought about because as our agricultural system was expanding, farmers were trying to buy corn, soy, whatever, and they were getting crap. And so this association was created to help farmers get a guarantee that the seeds that they brought would produce a crop that it says it's going to produce. So absolutely a seed certification is good. If you ask Monsanto, they would say, we don't care because none of their stuff is certified and they're the largest agricultural company in the world. So a little bit of give and take.
Is that the direction this is going, Monsanto?
There is nothing inherently wrong with a genetically modified organism. It's how it's used afterwards that can be the problem. I.e., if you make something resistant to a poison and you spray poison on the plants, that might be a bad thing. If we were to create a GMO that eliminates THC synthase so that the plant can't create THC, that's now a GMO. Is that inherently bad? Well, it just dropped THC, so now no farmer has to worry about THC concentration going up and it being marijuana. So, like I said, there's a give and a take. You could patent that just like Monsanto does, and so the owner of those genetics would make a lot more money, but it's going to cost a lot of money to get into that, so a seed certification program is also necessary for breeders who just want to be able to grow out like what Hemp Genetics does, as an example.
Now you said when I asked you, is it the answer? You said it's an answer.
Yeah.
What are some other answers?
Create GMOs. So here's an AOSCA, right? So one of their standards, or the rules and regulations don't allow a lot of things to happen. So as an example, I can take apical meristem cells, in theory. I have never done this. I plan on doing this. We can take apical meristem cells, get that into tissue culture, and then develop plants out of tissue culture that are 100% clones of one another. We can put those into a synthetic seed and then plant those synthetic seeds in the ground and have an entire acreage field, 100 acres as an example, that are 100% clones of one another, and under AOSCA rules, those can't be certified. So there are conditions where it's a good thing and a bad thing. Now, the great thing about AOSCA, I talked to the head of AOSCA today. I found a ton of information from him. They are always willing and open to changing their rules and regulations as the industry grows. So when I can actually do that, I can call them up and be like, hey, guess what I can do now? Let's change your rules and regulations, and they will adopt those rules. Or in theory, we'll talk about and hopefully adopt those rules.
Now, Ryan, fundamentally, what is the problem with seeds? As a farmer, where does it start? We've heard some of the problems, we've heard some of the solutions, we've heard some of the things that are going on. But as a farmer, can you just crystallize what is the problem from a farmer's perspective?
Well, the problem with not having certified seed is that
Not having seeds or planning to plant for a particular growing season, knowing or not knowing perhaps what's going to come up out of the ground.
Well, I mean, there's enough unknown with farming, as anybody knows, that there's no guarantee in anything to do with agriculture, whether it's cows or farming. So, having some security, with that knowledge, knowing that this is going to be a uniform crop that we can harvest all at the same time with a combine, ideally, with using machinery. This is extremely important. And the cost of operation with farming these days is high enough, and the last thing you need to do is start making mistakes and go backwards and having to cost yourself more money. So I mean, it is crucial to the industry. I mean, I think it has to happen. There's just no other way around it. In order for this industry to be a commodity that's on the stock exchange, it has to be a well-oiled machine, and we need uniformity and high-quality pedigree in order to do that. So I think it's the utmost important. I think, in this industry moving forward.
Ryan, it seems to me that most other agricultural industries, when a farmer puts a seed in the ground, it's sold. They know that this is going in a particular place once the yield comes around. We're not there yet. Can you describe how seeds might help put us in that position as a hemp industry?
Well, having enough quantity of seed to be able to sell across to other growers is key too, to where this is not a inflated price on all of the seeds. We can get it to where it's a legitimate, fair market price for everybody. That's really going to also set the tempo for the industry, and is also going to continue, encourage other farmers to plant. Because farmers aren't going to invest a lot of money when, like you say, there's no guarantee where they're going to go with their finished product. We know that the wheat market is stable somewhat, at a certain bushel, and we don't have that with hemp right now. And so until we can get, legitimate producers that aren't going to kind of price gouge people, when they do have a good harvest, and establish a consistent market throughout Colorado and the nation, I think that's the key component here.
So Kevin, ultimately, Canada's dealt with similar issues and issues over time, and certainly doesn't have, it does based on my reading of some of the Canadian laws, but generally we understand that Canada's produced hemp for a long time. And ultimately, what's your experience in some of the seed issues and how they affect the marketplace and how they've been addressed in the Canadian marketplace?
Well, I'm a partner in a seed company called Hemp Genetics. I'm also involved in food processing now through Hemp Production Services. And one of the challenges we first faced in Canada is the same challenge you're facing now, is that we imported genetics from other locations, and we evaluated those genetics, and then those genetics, which we found to have qualities that we liked, we started seed programs. That's why Hemp Genetics was formed, because we saw the need to develop regionally adapted varieties suitable for the Canadian climate. And that's what you need to do here in Colorado, is to develop regionally adapted varieties suitable to your climate. And at Current, our company sells 6 different varieties. I spent over a decade advising growers, which variety do I grow? Because they're quite different. I kind of look at them as different steps. Each one is a little bit different in height, maturity, seed size. There can also be differences in herbicide tolerance, and not GMO, but just natural genetic variation within populations. And choosing the right seed variety is critical to the farmer's success. For example, a seed variety which is taller and later, typically hemp has got larger seeds on taller plants, will require different machinery than a crop which is perhaps 4 feet tall. And so the ability for a farmer to properly harvest and dry and store the crop depends actually first on the genetics characteristics of the variety. So the decision on which variety to grow is not just, it's based on environment, it's also based on the farmer's infrastructure, his equipment, his drying capacity, whether there's a grain dryer, how he is set up. And so it's a very complex question. in order to be able to help the farmer arrive at the right solution in terms of choosing a seed variety, there actually also has to be then obviously ample supply. I had one year where I was quite comfortable growing one variety. That variety was sold out. At seeding time, I had to choose a different variety. I almost had a crop failure. I was this close to a crop failure because I didn't have the equipment to deal with that variety. It was completely different. And so what we've been kind of been talking about is something which we coin as predictability of performance. So if you can predict how this variety is going to perform under different cropping systems, whether it's organic, certified organic, conventional, dryland, irrigated, and also different geographical locations. If you're dealing with latitude, also has a strong impact on how hemp expresses height, for example. And so all these considerations have to come into play when you're looking at what you're going to grow and for the farmer to be successful. And when the farmer is not successful, when he has to struggle, I've personally spent 2 days in the back of a combine cutting out the fiber, leaf by leaf, fiber by fiber, with a needle nose pliers. Lying on the back of straw walkers is something I don't wish on anyone for 2 days. So, but that's something which happens when you don't get the right advice and you don't grow the right variety. And so for myself as a professional agronomist, I see the value in that because I've paid the price myself personally, literally, and learned the hard way. And so seed and having the right selection, the right advice, knowing how those varieties perform in those regions is so critical to the success for the farmer. And when the farmer here, when he's successful, then that is efficient. And then you can compete with other jurisdictions. We have farmers now in southern Alberta which will regularly pull off 2,000 up to 3,000 pounds per acre in terms of yield. Those are exceptional yields. When we started out in Canada, our yields were sub 1,000 pounds an acre, a couple hundred pounds an acre. So when you look at your revenue stream as a farmer, if you're getting paid 75 cents on 2,000 to 3,000 pounds an acre versus 200 or 300 pounds an acre, it's substantial. It makes the difference of whether you're going to actually farm and be profitable. And then if that seed, for example, if you're only producing 200 or 300 pounds, you're going to want to have $2 a pound on that, or something really high. You can't compete on the retail shelf with farmers who are producing 2,000 or 3,000 pounds an acre. It's just not going to happen. So these are kind of the harsh realities which are sitting in front of you here. So in my mind, you have to look at what you can bring in, evaluate it, develop your own seed certification program, which you're doing, and be able to, through the trials, be able to advise farmers so they can be efficient. In a food, and I'm speaking strictly in terms of food processing and a food system. This is what, in my mind, is required. So.
No, thank you, Kevin. Now, John, can you talk a little bit about your work and the research that you're doing and how that plays into learning about different variations of seeds and how seeds will perform in different environments and at different latitudes, et cetera, and how that might help solve this problem?
Sure. So, I think just reiterating that, this decision-making process of farmers. So farmers are like any other small business, except they only make money once a year, which is a huge difference. And so they make their decisions, over the winter, or maybe even up to now, of what they're going to plant on what acre, what they're going to harvest it with, and where they're going to drive that truck to sell it. You can't really. Hemp right now is challenged by not having those answers in place for the farmers. At Colorado State University, we started looking at variety trials of European varieties. So pretty much every European variety was originally bred as a fiber type. They're quite tall. They can also be grown and managed as a grain type, but they are quite lanky compared to any other crops that farmers and their harvesting equipment deal with around here. But we've been looking at those varieties all under irrigated conditions to start around the state of Colorado, and we're also collaborating with a European Union funded project, and so these varieties are being grown across latitudes in Europe as well, looking at things, regular yield component traits of emergence, as well as some of the possible end-use phenotypes. And on the European part of this project, they've done a lot of stuff actually on phenotyping the fiber quality of some of these lines, which is not something we have any infrastructure to do here in the U.S. But so we're planning to continue that work. There's a couple of I have a PhD student that's working on this as one of his projects, and the challenge really right now is that there's no federal funding available for doing anything with cannabis. So at the university, everything we do comes from competitive federal grants. And last year, our hemp trials, we got a little bit of money through the Ag Experiment Station, which is part of the university. And we're hoping that happens again this year. But before a large amount of R&D rolls out, there's going to need to be competitive federal funding available. And we've been in conversations with the funding agencies about that, but there's no answers yet.
If you're at liberty to say, what type of agencies are we talking about that would provide types of funding?
The USDA has competitive grant funding. It's relatively small, and then the National Science Foundation is where we get most of our research funding at the university. Department of Energy is another source. So.
Now, Andrea, you've worked with a lot of entities, organizations, and countries, frankly, in development of regulations. How have you, in a regulatory context, addressed this or tried to go down the road of looking at the seed issue?
Well, just don't put that seed saving clause in there, and then at least you've got something to stand on, because then you're working on the contract itself that you're putting in place.
Describe what you mean by that, just so we're all talking about the same thing. What's the seed saving
Oh,
clause?
so that would just basically mean that the farmer could get any seed that he wanted, or she, and then whatever they would plant, they would be able to harvest and then call that planting seed again. So there's a little terminology here. So one is hemp seed, being 2 words, which is something that's intended to be planted in the ground. The word hemp seed, 1 word, would be hemp grain, which is intended to be rendered non-viable to create some sort of derivative like hulled hemp, hemp seed oil, or hemp powder, for instance. Hemp isn't classified scientifically, it's an achene anyway, so calling it a seed is actually scientifically incorrect. But hemp achene oil, that's just not sexy, and we're not gonna sell that. But a couple of the things that I see as a benefit coming off of pedigreed seed production, what we've seen in Canada now is that we actually have varieties that are on our approved cultivar list that no longer require an in-field THC test on the producer level. This is such a huge benefit to the producer. Number one, it's very expensive. It's around almost $300 really to have 1 THC test done in Canada. It's a substantial amount of money coming out of the farmer's pocket every single year. So these pedigreed seed programs have shown our Health Canada office that the varieties are stable and that we do not need to worry about THC testing on the farmer level. Now, the THC is still tested in the pedigreed seed production or in the registration of that variety. So now this just takes one more step out of having to have us treated like criminals and monitored every single year. Now, people have said to me, oh, but now that makes you not have work. You just diversify. You create some other work. And part of that other work in a pedigreed seed production is actually people to go out and maintain your varieties. And so you actually need to have physical bodies actually going out to the hemp fields or into your breeder plots and roguing them and making sure that you're selecting. So it's not like we're, taking away from people having work. We're actually creating a market also where we could have smaller entities and smaller family farms actually running these pedigreed seed production programs. Of course, they need to be registered to create that. But I've been in pedigreed seed plots that are maybe 3 acres, maybe 2, maybe 1. So somebody has to maintain those. So that's an opportunity there.
Yeah, I'd just like to walk people through a little bit, really basically, what our process is in Canada for developing a variety. It actually takes about 7 years to bring a variety into commercialization. So there's about 4 years of selections where you have parental lines and you're making your selections, and these are down to the individual plant level. Our plant breeder is very much a traditional plant breeder. We look at it in our company. There's 3 of us who are principals. It's a family farm. corporation, if you want to put it that way. You know, we're not Monsanto, but it takes time. It takes expertise. You know, most of the kids in our families have spent time in the hot Canadian summers when we do have some heat, roguing, which means the term rogue means to develop a uniform germplasm. So when you see plants which are a little different, you pull them out. When in doubt, yank it out. And so this is part of the system to ensure that we have uniformity down the line. We actually use 3 levels of certified seed in Canada. We have breeder. There's also foundation, registered and certified. We actually skip the foundation step and go right to registered and certified. So we actually manage 3 levels of certified seed in Canada. Once we actually have something which we can call a variety, something which is distinct, uniform, and stable, which is about a 4-year process, we then have about a 3 to 4 year process of bulking it up to commercial quantities. And so there is a substantial investment in time and money to get seed to commercial quantities. And our people who we work with are all family farms. They're the ones who are replicating the seed for us in the bulking up process. And at that point, after 7 or 8 years, we can then release the seed. Now, to respond a little bit to the farmer save seed clause, there's nothing that restricts a farmer who's a pedigreed seed grower from using his own seed. If you're part of that system, you can happily use your own seed, and often farmers in our seed program will say, I want to use my own seed. I said, that's absolutely fine. They haul it into a third-party plant, it's clean to international standards, and they buy it back. And that works. What doesn't work from a seed company is to spend 7 or 8 years developing some technology, developing intellectual property, and selling it once, and then it belongs to someone else. There's no return on investment in that. And our company, Hemp Genetics, we've never received a penny from any government funding source. Our funding comes from the farmers supporting our products. And so those farmers, by buying our products at a reasonable price, the same as they would pay for other grain crops for their seed, support innovation. Without that support, you will not have innovation, and you will fall behind jurisdictions which have that in place. And so it's, think of that when you're making your decisions on how you want your industry to progress. Because if there isn't some return back for the expertise and time that's put into developing this germplasm, if there isn't a reasonable return, that'll fall flat, because eventually government funding will dry up. Quite frankly, there's a few programs in Canada which depend on government funding. None of those varieties have ever been really commercialized because they don't have a commercial aspect. Most of these varieties are either dual purpose or fiber-only applications, and we have no fiber industry in Canada. And so it's money which is, for me as a taxpayer, I see that's just kind of being thrown away because it doesn't really have applications. So our company, in retrospect, we say, what does the farmer in Western Canada want to grow? What does he need? He needs a shorter plant. He needs more seeds in a more compact plant so he could be efficient. So that's what we breed for. So we have strategic breeding objectives, which will be, is what the farmer is looking for. And that makes our company commercially successful without government funding.
No, Grant, that's great. That's a great overview. Thank you for that. And bringing it back to Colorado, Grant, we talked earlier, and you thought, and Dwayne, we'll sort of close this out with you. You thought, or you suggested that perhaps there's a funding element to the issue when you talk about the CDA and moving forward with the seed certification program. Maybe you could comment on that, or at least identify what you perceive as a problem.
Right. So registration fee currently is $500 plus $5 an acre, or if you're indoors, a certain percentage, cents per square foot. If you join the seed certification program, you got to join Colorado Seed Growers Association, which is $150. Then you pay another $500. Then you got to pay the inspectors to come out to your property. So you got to pay them mileage plus time, and then there's like 2 or 3 other fees on top of that. And that's pretty basic for seed certification in general. If you're doing wheat, it's the same basic rules for wheat. The other additions are CDA is going to test every single year for THC, and that's going to cost you $1,500 per variety. So money keeps adding up on the industrial hemp industry, and like Andrea said, we need to stop being treated like criminals when the whole problem to begin with is marijuana. If it wasn't for marijuana, hemp would not have to jump through all of these hoops. The problem with the way that the laws are written, and it should be Amendment 64, right, Dwayne, that mandates the CDA fund itself for the industrial hemp program. So that means all registrants are going to be required to keep paying this registration fee, and if the CDA needs more money to run the seed certification program, that's going to be on us as well. When marijuana is making money hands over fists, and they're the reason that we have all of this expenses. So there's a couple of provisions. Amendment 64 allows the CDA to get up to $10 million from the marijuana tax cash fund to put into a research and development program through grant applications to private farmers or private companies. It's important that the CDA go after that money. It's important that the people pressure your state legislatures to go ahead and get that money. Second, the CDA asked for money for the seed certification program, but it was a one-time asking. So after the 2017 season, the CDA is no longer going to ask for money for the seed certification program because of that law that mandates CDA be self-funded. So we've talked about changing Colorado's law to do, let's not 0.3%, but allow it to go up to 1%, because 1% is still not going to make you high. But even if you did that, we still have this problem with all of the money that the industrial hemp people are going to have to pay when this marijuana tax cash fund just keeps getting larger and larger, and the industrial hemp industry can't get anything out of it. So that's a huge issue that we have that's going to end up, a lot of people are going to go bankrupt because they're going to have all of these fees and all of these costs. And let's say you enter the seed certification program and you fail. Then lots of bad things happen. You can't re-enter the program for a certain period of time, and it's cost you all of this money. All of those together are bad. However, we can mitigate some of this risk by using our sister industry and all of their tax money, which is one way that Colorado, as a leader in both marijuana and industrial hemp, can probably help push that along.
Well, thank you for that. And if you could pass that microphone down. Dwayne, obviously funding's a critical element to what you and the organization do, and it makes it all happen. Specifically concerning the seed certification program, that's not an inexpensive endeavor. So perhaps you could comment on a little bit what Grant had suggested, and talk about some of the things you've thought about in respect to funding and how this might move forward.
Sure. Seed certification is an expensive program. It's expensive for every industry. It's no different for hemp than it is for anybody else. Corn doesn't ask for wheat to pay for theirs. Hemp shouldn't expect somebody else to pay for theirs. If we want this to be a real industry, we have to stand on our own feet, because the more we depend on somebody else, another federally illegal industry, the more we're tied to that industry. So we firmly believe that the industry is able to pay for itself, to be part of their normal agricultural community. I'll go back to what we said before. We're trying to make this be less criminal-looking product, and so the less we depend on another industry, the better off we think we're going to be. There was some misinformation. Grant said that there would be $1,500 every year charged. That's not correct. There's a $1,500 charge to do a THC testing for the program. So that's a little different than $1,500 every year. So it is a program that's expensive. Don't get me wrong, it's not for everybody. Again, it goes back to that we have parallel systems. You can decide to pay for something on the front end or the back end. When it comes to how do we, what money do we look at and how do we look at it? When we go to the cash cow, the marijuana tax fund that everybody thinks it is, there's an awful lot of conversation that goes on before we ever get to making a request, and a lot of those requests are denied before we ever get to making a formal request. And even the formal request we made, we got only a part of the money we asked for, and part of that was for inspectors to go out there. As I look at how the funding was cut, they didn't tell us what to cut, they just cut. And when they got all done cutting, we've got inspectors to go out there, but no way to get them out there. So if you see a bunch of inspectors trying to do their job, it's because they've got a bus pass to get around. So, the funding thing is difficult. We laid out last fall and presented to the advisory committee funding proposals for the certified seed program, sharing that cost between the farmer, who would pay because he has a benefit of not having us to come out to do his test, which can, I don't know, Ryan probably remembers what his bill was. Significant, more significant than you probably wanted. And if you could roll that into a small fee to plant those, to plant that certified seed, that idea really came from our registrants. When most of our registrants said, Dwayne, I'm going to be tested once every 2 or 3 or 4 years, and I'm going to have this magical $500, $600, $700 testing fee. Why don't you charge us all a little more in our registration? So we took that idea, Grant, and wrapped that into the seed certification program to mitigate their risk and to share it equally among everybody. And then the other part we've said is, as part of that testing program, development of the seed certified system program, those breeders that want to participate, they have a different access to the market because they have those farmers that know what product they're going to get, know it's pure, know it's everything else. They'll share in that testing process. So it is a shared cost, so it doesn't end up in one, because if I charged Kevin everything the program was going to be, he might decide that Colorado weren't at all interested in sharing in his varieties in the state for just the economic reason. But if he realizes that he has an economic advantage in the marketplace because Ryan now is more interested in buying certified seed, he may be willing to share in that cost. So it is a shared cost, and it helps both parties.
Well, gosh, we've run out of time here, and this is we've solved the problem, right? I think we've all solved it. Sincere thank you to Ryan, to Kevin, Andrea, Grant, Dwayne, John. Thank you for everybody. Listen, they're going to be available after. If you have questions, please feel free to come up. A question that comes to my mind, and I think that this would be important, is if we solve the seed problem, but perhaps make it easier for the seeds to get to the farmers for the right purposes, does that prompt and promote investment in the processing and the infrastructure development that we need to do other things besides CBD extraction? And that's the future of the hemp world. Thank you all. Thank you all. You've said it all. Have a good day. Appreciate it.